right. Have you heard the term Gillifan?
No.
There's a Gillifan here.
Thank you.
He coined that, sorry. This is the question that I ask everyone who's running.
Yeah.
In a field this crowded, in a country where tens of millions of people are constitutionally eligible, why should you, Kirsten Gillibrand, you be the sole person that wields this powerful office? Why should you be president?
I believe I'm the best candidate to take on President Trump because I have the vision of what actually needs to be done in this country. I've listened to voters all across this country about what's going on in their lives and what their worries are and their challenges. I have the compassion to fully absorb that and then offer a real plan, a real set of ideas about how to solve these problems. And I have the experience. I've actually gotten things done over the last 10 years in the Senate and 12 years in Congress and brought people together to do the right thing. And let me explain. When I've talked to folks around my state of New York, all across your state and states around the country, they're worried about health care. They want health care as a right, not a privilege. They're worried about education. They're worried about their kids and crumbling public schools, early childhood education, affordable quality college. They're worried about jobs. They want to be able to earn their way into the middle class. They want to live the American dream. And they're really worried about corruption and greed in Washington. They want money out of politics. They want publicly funded elections. And those are the things that I have actual legislation to get these things done. It's why I'm for Medicare for all. It's why I'm for the Green New Deal. It's why I'm for rewarding work. And it's why I'm for publicly funded elections.
So let's talk. I want to talk politics. You said you're the best person to beat Donald Trump and policy. Let's talk about record.
But I just didn't finish. The one thing I just want to add is that my record in Congress is about bringing people together. Not only did I win a 2-to-1 Republican district twice, the first time by 6 points, the second time by 24 points. Then I served the U.S. Senate for 10 years. Every election, I brought the state together. I have the highest vote total of 72%. That's higher than anyone who's ever run, President Obama, Secretary Clinton, any person who's run statewide in its history. And I get bills passed, big bills like Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal and the 9/11 health bill, money for our first responders who are dying of cancers because they did the brave things, but also smaller things that matter. In the last Congress, the Republican House, Senate, and President, I passed 18 bills into law, things that would help Michigan, like money for rural broadband, money for small businesses, money for Made in America.
So let me ask you about you did win this relatively conservative district. In fact, it was a quite conservative district, 2-to-1, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And you had positions that were more conservative at the time. You got an A rating from the NRA. You ran ads about the specter of illegal aliens. What do you say to someone who looks at your political trajectory and says you were sort of pandering to those voters then, and then you became a statewide politician in New York, and you became liberal, and now you're running a Democratic primary, and you're basically following what is most convenient politically?
First, I also ran on, in 2005, Medicare for All, because I traveled around my district and asked people what they needed. They were so worried about health care, they couldn't afford it. I also ran on getting out of Iraq. And when I started running on that issue, very few of the people in the district supported it, but by election day, 70% supported getting out of Iraq. So I led on that issue, which is why I think I will be the best candidate. Now, on guns, I should have done more. I regret, actually, not caring about other communities. My community didn't have the gun violence that other parts of the state had. And in fact, the biggest issue for upstate New York was hunting rights. And, my mother didn't just cook the Thanksgiving turkey, she shot the Thanksgiving turkey. So I came from a different lens. But what I regret is that I should have cared more about ending gun violence in other places. And so the first thing I did when I became a senator was met with families who lost their loved ones to gun violence. And when you meet a mother or father who has lost a child to gun violence, there is no way you will ever not answer them directly and say, I will do something to end gun violence. And that's what I did.
So that's the change. I mean, when you talk about your change on this, what you're saying is you were convinced through talking to these individuals that you had the wrong position, and you changed your mind.
More than convinced that I should have been better, that I was humbled and regretted that I didn't think beyond the needs or the priorities of the people I represented, because the truth is we all have a responsibility to end gun violence in this country. We all have to take on the corruption and greed that the NRA represents. The gun manufacturers want to sell weapons to everyone. It doesn't matter if you're a teenager in a Walmart or someone on the terror watch list or someone who has grave mental illness with a violent background or someone with a violent criminal record. The reason why they oppose universal background checks is because they want to sell those weapons to all those people. And we're having a debate in this country about what's capitalism and what's socialism. Well, let's just find one really important difference. There is a difference between capitalism and greed. And the line is when a gun manufacturer says, I want to sell this weapon to anyone at any cost and not care that it results in children dying on a park bench in Brooklyn. It is unacceptable, and it is why all of us are required to stand up to the gun manufacturers, stand up to the corruption and greed that runs Washington, and hold them accountable.
You support publicly funded elections. You just talked about standing up for corruption and greed. What effect do your donors have on you? You've been criticized for raising money from Wall Street. You're a New York senator, and New York senators of whichever party get a lot of money from Wall Street. What does someone purchase when they max out to Kirsten Gillibrand?
Absolutely nothing. When someone gives you money for your campaign, it's because they believe in you. And my values have never been for sale.
If that's the case, then why is it so important to get publicly funded elections? If there's no input to output correlation, right?
Yep.
Then what's corrupt about the system?
The reason why we need publicly funded elections, which is why I am, number one, not taking corporate PAC money, not taking federal lobbyist money, not having individual super PAC. The reason why I've made those commitments is because it's a first step. And the reason why you need to get money out of politics is because the way Washington works, and this is what I've learned in 10 years, is that the powerful have unlimited power, and money is the name of the game. So when the NRA doesn't want any gun reform, they funnel money into campaigns of candidates across this country to make sure they don't vote for common sense gun reform. If you believe health care is a right and not a privilege, well, you have to be willing to take on the insurance companies, because they will funnel money into Washington with the most sophisticated lobbyists in the world to make sure we don't have Medicare for all, to make sure they aren't cut out of the system. Because you know what the insurance companies do? It's a middleman. They take a lot of money out of the system and doesn't actually provide you value. So that's why we have to fight against that. When you're suffering from the opioid crisis, like they are in my state, in your state, states all across the country, what we have to do is take on the drug manufacturers who purposefully made these drugs stronger, more addictive, and now that we have the documents, we know they did it because they wanted record sales.
Should there be some accountability for these corporations?
Absolutely.
Is that something that you would pursue through the Department of Justice if you were the President of the United States?
Let's just take the opioid crisis. They should be prosecuted. What we now know from internal investigations...
Who should be prosecuted?
I think what we know from the evidence that's been gleaned from what the Sackler family did and how they looked at drugs as a way to make billions of dollars and making sure that the dosage was higher so they are more addictive, the way they dampen down any investigation, any transparency and accountability, that is what we have to take on. And so if you're not willing to do the hard work, which I am, to take money out of politics, to have publicly funded elections, to ensure voting rights, we as people, as Americans, everyone in this town hall, this is what democracy looks like. You looking me in the eye and saying, if you're going to be my president, this is what I expect of you. Until we restore what's been broken, what's been lost, by getting money out of politics and changing who has the power in this country, it shouldn't be the elite of the elite, the most wealthy and the most powerful companies in America that can fund lobbyists, fund campaigns. It's all related. And that's why I'm running for president, because it's not just about President Trump. It's about taking on this corruption and greed that defines everything.
Stick around.
Yes.
Don't go anywhere at home. We'll be right back with this town hall with Kirsten Gillibrand here in Michigan.
Thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.